Hey, welcome folks to sunny Edinburgh and to the first of a couple of shows where I'm just going to do some hints and tips on playing about with this Zoom Ecamm profile that I've put together and that you can go download for free if you know where to get it. So the bit that I wanted to concentrate here on is my background in the layout here. So at the moment I've intentionally chosen a very sort of business-like plain layout in order to not be too fussy, and I've done that by putting an outer frame down in the bottom corner here and changing that outer frame to be purple gradient. So I can go up here and I can change the color to anything that I want to. I'm not going to change that for the moment. I could have it as a solid color. I could even have it as a motion gradient in the background. I don't think I'd really want to do that, but I can go and change the colors of that background rectangle, and that will keep that in every scene because it's in showing backgrounds. But there's also a couple of other things that I've got going on here as well. So I have an inner frame on every scene, and the reason I have it on every scene is because it's this shape which is just inside the purple area. So it's the rounded cornered square. Now if I drop that into showing background for the moment, it will just come out as a full white square, so I need to put it into every scene. But I can turn that on or off if I want a little bit more room on the screen. I prefer it on, but I can also of course change the color on that as well. So if I want to change the color on that, then I can choose to change the color on my background. Maybe I want to flip it around and have black and white, so the black is on the inner area and the white is on the outer area. I guess I could do that if I wanted to. So that's the basics for changing all the colors, and you will have to change the inner color on every scene if you decide you want to change the inner color, because that is going to be on every scene, whereas the showing background ones will be in every single scene. So in the showing background there are two other elements as well, a tint and a background picture. So what happens when I turn those on and off accordingly? So if I turn on the tint here, then what's going to happen is it's going to blend the purple background with whatever tint color I've set. So I've got my tint color set as red at the moment. The blend mode is overlay, so what it's going to do is it's going to blend those two colors together. And if I change the color here and choose a different color, it's going to blend them together accordingly. So that's all it's doing, is it's just picking up the different colors. So if I choose white, it's going to blend the purple and the white together and give me a lighter color. If I choose the orange one, it's going to do something a bit bizarre and not particularly nice, but if I pick out the red one, it gives me quite a nice color tint in the background. And you can go change those as much as you want. You could also try changing the blend mode as well, which will have some dramatic effects dependent on which ones you choose. So no particular way of knowing what they're going to do. I tend to stick with overlay because it gives subtle changes. So that's what the tint does there. So that's the tint applied to just the outer frame there. But let's remove the inner frame here also. So you're going to see, because the tint's covering the whole screen, it's going to affect everything. So it's no longer purple, we're now in this sort of magenta color. So other things in the background as well, I've actually got a picture in the background here, so I'm going to turn off my outer frame here, and I'm going to turn off the tint, and I am going to turn on the background picture, which is kind of a stripy radiant thing going on in the background. And so you can turn on that, or you can bring in your own picture, whatever you want to do. The tint will also affect that as well. So if I hit the tint button now, suddenly I've got a pinky red tint on there, and if I remove the inner frame, suddenly you can see the full background picture in all of its glory, and how it's going to look on your Zoom call. Probably a bit too much, so I'm just keeping it round the edges there. Now I could also potentially, if I wanted to, drop in a motion background in showing background and have that running as well. But on this particular scene, I have got the Zoom active speaker and a whole bunch of guests plus me, and that's kind of the max that you're allowed in Ecamm. So I don't think I'd go down the route of putting in a motion background on this particular scene. If I did, it would be something very slow and perhaps a bit of a glow running across the screen, something like that. Certainly not anything sort of busy and too in your face, because I've already done that with this whole background here. So let's just flick that back to what it was to start with. So nothing at all going on. Bring on the outer frame. So that's how easy it is to change all of the background colors for all of the scenes using just that show in background outer frame. So that's the end of tip number 1. I'll be back for some more. Okay, so active speaker mode. I've got a few scenes set up here for active speaker mode. So you'll see panel zoom, active speaker, and the idea here is really that you've got a whole bunch of guests on and you want to be able to see your guests, which I think is really important. We'll come back to that a little bit later. But the idea here is that each of your guests will jump into the large box in the center where we've got our active speaker whenever they speak. So beware that with Ecamm at the moment, it's super sensitive. The guys have done a great job of making the active speaker jump into the center of the screen. But if anybody coughs or sneezes because they don't have their mic on mute, they're going to jump straight into that active speaker instantaneously, and I do mean instantaneously. So you're going to have to do some housekeeping if you're running with active speaker and ask everybody to mute their microphones and then say, guest 8, would you like to unmute and come on to the main stage? And then they can come on, and then you can replace them potentially, and then you can say, guest 7, would you like to unmute and come on? But you'll have to do a bit of housekeeping like that. As it stands on the 10th of July, hopefully there'll be some features in there that will allow us to control things a bit better later on. But I've got some different panels set up just to let you see. But the idea is, of course, because it's a panel, there's quite a lot of guests. So let's have a quick look at those. So we've got one where I'm reasonably large, the active speaker is reasonably large, and I've got 4 guests, any of which might jump into that scene with me. And I should really have set my camera up a little bit better for that one. And here we got another one which I haven't got the camera set up properly for. And here we've got a third one with 8 people. And then back to the one where I did set up the camera properly and move myself up into the corner. But you get the idea that everybody's going to jump in and out of the active speaker area with those scenes. So what I'm going to do now is, I think I'm just going to show, let me just hide the scenes for a minute, and we're going to bring on the camera settings. So I'm going to bring up my camera window. So let's have a look at the camera effects window. We'll bring that in over here, and I'm just going to get rid of the overlays because we don't really need to worry about those on this particular scene. And then I'll scroll in a little bit here just to make that a little bit more obvious as to what I'm going to do here. So what I want to do is just a little neat trick which I have played about with a couple of times in terms of messing about with the cameras and how they're going to appear. So what I tend to do is actually choose my camera and all of my guests' cameras. So in this case I'm on camera A. So if I can zoom down to camera A, that would be useful. Scroll down a bit. Camera A, and come back out again. So on camera A, what I want to do is I want to turn myself to black and white. So I tend, I just found this out really by playing about, but if I go and switch all of the cameras to black and white, so I go through each one of them and choose guest 1, and I go to guest 1 and I set that to black and white, and guest 2, guest 3, etc. for all of my guests, then I can have them all sitting in black and white, and then when the active speaker comes on, they can jump into the middle in color. So in order to do that, I'm just going to have to change my preferences slightly so that I can show you me jumping into the center in color, which I will do as soon as I change the preference. So I come up to preferences, I look for my zoom preferences, and in here there's one, show me as active speaker using camera, in this case camera A, and you can probably see behind the scenes that the camera in the center of the screen is then color. So for me, the idea would be that I can see all of my guests on my scene, and I can see what they're doing, and I can talk to them and get them to jump into the center in color while everyone else is sitting in black and white, so the color person is the one of focus there in the center, and I think that looks kind of cool. So just another little way to play about with active speaker in Zoom, and hopefully, as I say, we'll get some more function buttons that we can press to maybe pause the active speaker jumping about, or mute some guests, or something along those lines, to make it a bit more manageable, because it's very much dependent upon that housekeeping at the moment. But there you go, that's an idea for you. Change all your guests to black and white and just have the center one sitting in color for a different effect that people will never have seen on Zoom before. Time for the end of this video. Okay, so just another little hint and tip, this time on Immersive Presentations. So here I am sitting on my scene, which is just my whole bunch of guests and me sitting in the active speaker Zoom window at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a screen share. So here's my screen share overlay. I'm going to add that in, and I'm going to choose to show keynote. So here's my keynote going on in the background. Not a particularly exciting slide, but for demonstration purposes it will do just fine. So I'm just going to hit the option key to drag that down so that's a better size. Trim it up a little bit. And then I'm just going to stick that up so as it sits in that top edge, so that I know it's the right size. And then I shall drag it out a little bit there. And I'll bring it down just a little, because that's going to be fine for the purposes of what I want to do right now. So I've got my screen share in there. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into my cameras, and I'm just going to get rid of that Zoom active speaker for the moment, because we don't want that. Because what I want to do is have an immersive experience for my screen share. So suddenly I'm doing a screen share, but all of my guests are sitting on the screen with me. So because I have a background color that is white, and my palette in the background of my presentation is also white, then suddenly I get a sort of look and feel for that screen share that makes it look a bit bigger. I mean, it looks like my guests are actually on the presentation and in the presentation with me. So the reason I think that that's really, really clever and important is that when you're using screen shares with Zoom, there is a tendency for it to take over the whole screen, and in particular if you're just using one screen, that then becomes quite difficult to see the participants who are on the call, because they all go up to the little person in person, and if you're lucky you'll be able to see them in the gallery view at the top, but they'll be tiny. But if you're not lucky, it'll take over the whole screen and you'll be sitting there totally blind. So that's all dependent on Zoom settings and how many monitors you've got, and whether you're working with 2 monitors and things like that. But you can get a situation where you're doing the absolutely horrible "can you see my screen?" and you're not on the screen at all, unless you have placed yourself on top of a presentation using Ecamm. And if you've done that, then you're immediately corrupting your deck, so to speak. The way I'm doing it at the moment, I'm not corrupting the deck, so I'm not having to change the deck at all and trying to make space for me on it, because that's sitting in the middle of my screen. But the big deal here is, for me, it's for eye contact. So we talk about eye contact a lot, and why you should stare at the camera and maybe have yourself some sort of an iPad sitting up there with all your teleprompter stuff on, or whatever it is going on. So, but that's eye contact between you and your audience. But as a presenter, I actually want eye contact from the audience, not just to the audience. So I want that to be a bi-directional thing. And so by bringing my audience into the presentation with me in larger squares, in this particular case, I guess they could be any shape, but by bringing them in this manner, I can actually see their facial expressions. When they're sitting little pimple in person in the gallery, as I call it, you can't really see their facial expressions. You might see their hands going up and down or something like that, but in order to be able to see their facial expressions, you want to bring them on a little bit larger, and you want to be a reasonable size on the screen as well. You don't want to be crammed down into the corner because you're trying to avoid corrupting your deck, whether that's PowerPoint or Keynote, or indeed any other slideware, or indeed a web widget, whatever that is. Same principle applies here. By changing my color background to the same as the slide, it's going to look like a totally immersive presentation, and I'm going to be able to see all of my guests very clearly and obviously, which is exactly what I want to do. Now again, I might choose to use that little trick of making every camera black and white, perhaps except for mine, while I'm the presenter, so that it's not distracting to watch all the other people, but I can still see what's going on, but they're focusing on me in color and what's going on in the center of the screen. Now clearly you need to decide how much information you've got in the center of the screen and whether or not you want to bring everybody on in this manner, but providing you set your slide decks up sensibly, this should work. If it doesn't quite work, then you can always make things a little bit smaller for all of the guests and increase the size of that slide deck if you've got a busy slide deck. And in business, quite often they are busier than you would like them to be, but that becomes a necessity. But you could still get everybody on the slide in a way that it feels like it's immersive and they're of a reasonable size, and that you're not staring in loads of different places to try and see the gallery. I find it totally infuriating with Teams in particular. Don't know if it still does that, not been on it for a while, but it used to put the gallery right down at the bottom. So even if you got the gallery there, you'd be staring down like this to try and see what people's faces were like, and then looking up at the actual screen. So for me, this is a much more engaging and immersive way for doing things, and it's very, very easy. You can just match your background color of your slide with the background color of the presentation and you're good to go. So another little tip, and that was tip number 3. So for the moment, cheerio, see you later.